This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, it is another of my series of shows on religions. The Baha'i Faith is up this time. I'm going to be talking with actress Nan-Lynn Nelson and Hillary Chapman, and we will be discussing the history of Baha'i and other things. My guests tonight are Nan-Lynn Nelson, an American actress, and Hillary Chapman, an American musician, I suppose, from what I can see. And we're going to be talking about the Baha'i Faith. It's another in my series on the history and belief systems of various religions. So welcome to you both. Nan is making her third appearance. So Nan, if you could give a little bit of background about yourself and just some opening comments on what Baha'i Faith is to you, how you got involved, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Dan, for having me. Hi, Hillary. Good to see you. Well, I have been a professional actor in the theater and film and television for over 40 years, and also a teaching artist in public and private schools, writer, director, and I was introduced to the Baha'i Faith by a very good friend of mine, Jeffrey Ewing, and met him actually. He's also an actor. Met him at an audition, and the first time I had ever heard of this faith, and didn't really think much of it. I thought it was just a good line, but I did my research, and we made friends and actually got married. And so I've been practicing the faith for, wow, about 35 years now. Yeah.
Hillary, if you could as well give a little background about yourself and your opening comments and how you got involved with Baha'i Faith.
My great-grandparents were immigrants from Germany, and they moved to the Chicago area. And they were devout Lutherans. They studied classes on the Baha'i Faith as it relates to the Bible, and they became very sincere believers. And that's been 5 generations now, or 4 generations rather. And my 2 sisters also are sincere believers in the Baha'i Faith. Actually, I knew Nan, I still know Nan and Jeffrey, but we knew each other in the New York City area in the 1990s when they were both acting. And I'm here now in Washington, D.C., and my primary role in the community now is I have a children's school, a spiritual education school up on 16th Street in the Baha'i Center, and I work as a teacher, writer, and a blues musician.
So before we talk about the history of the religion, and it's a fairly new religion, less than 200 years old, let me just open with a comment about my own understanding of what Baha'i was. I grew up in New York City, and one of the things that I found interesting was that in that day when I was young, there were a lot of black Muslims, and it seemed that if black Americans were not switching over from mainline Christianity to black Muslim, I guess it's part of it, Black Islam, I guess you would call it. They were Baha'i, and frankly, Hillary, you're probably the first white person I've ever met who was a Baha'i. I knew about 12 Baha'is or so in public school growing up. There's a famous poet, Robert Hayden, a black American poet who is a Baha'i, and then Nancy. So is it just sort of a statistical anomaly for me as a white guy in America to have known nothing but black Baha'is, or is there what is the percentage in America? Let me start with you, Hillary, first.
I don't know the percentage, but yes, in your case, it's an anomaly. Okay. The Baha'i Faith entered the black community in a big way through the attraction to the Baha'i Faith of a lawyer who worked at the Department of Treasury, a man named Louis Gregory. He was a very brilliant, very spiritually insightful man, and his writings actually today ring truer than ever. And he became a convert to the Baha'i Faith, actually through some white Baha'is, and then there was racial mixing, which in Washington, D.C., where he was very unusual. And the Baha'i Faith grew quite rapidly among Black Americans. They're professors from Howard, music directors, and then average Black American, middle-income Black Americans became Baha'is, and a substantial community grew up there through the work of Louis Gregory. One of the interesting things about Louis Gregory's conversion is that he was encouraged to go to meetings by a white man who worked in the Treasury office. This was, half a century after the Civil War, and there was a guy who was pro-union on one side and pro-Confederacy on the other, and it's the pro-Confederate guy who kept encouraging Louis Gregory to go to his first Bahai meeting. And he became an extraordinarily distinguished Bahai and was greatly honored, and today is thought of with great respect and admiration by Baha'is the world over, really.
Any comments from you, Nancy, regarding my statistical anomaly?
Yeah, I'm so surprised to hear that, because that is, right now not the case. I know that there was a big Black sort of introduction to the faith in South Carolina, but for the most part, Black people of color are still sort of in the minority, if you will, of participants. Although, there's lots of outreach for more people of color, African Americans, to become Baha'is. And there's a very special station that the founder of the Baha'i faith, who's Baha'u'llah, has given to African Americans in particular, which is in scripture is called the pupil of the eye. And as Black people, there's that certain understanding, because of our history, that we have this ability to kind of see things and illumine things in a way to sort of help show other people a different perspective. And the writings, and I don't know the quotes, Hillary, you might just talk about the pupil of the eye and Black people being able to sort of unite the world, really. So it really is important to get, to really reach out to the African American community.
Let me just let's just stick with some of the basic tenets before we go back to the history. I mentioned Black Muslims, and I remember in 6th grade when I was 11, there was an incident where there were two young Black people who refused to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance because I was just a troublemaker. But one was a Black Muslim girl who refused to have a false god, which she thought the pledge was, a false god. And the other one was a Bahai girl, a young Black girl. And so I'm just wondering, do Baha'is see things such as the Pledge of Allegiance or these kind of overt displays to something that isn't there, whatever the God might be? We'll get into that. Do they have those same kinds of objections that Black Muslims, as in the Farrakhan, Malcolm X Black Muslims, not mainstream Islam, have? Hillary or Nan? Either one.
There's no specific teaching in the Baha'i faith about that. Baha'is are supposed to be well-wishers of their nations. They're supposed to be work with authorities in the spirit of bettering the society. So sometimes bettering the society means pointing out something that's problematic. Sometimes bettering the society means supporting something. Sometimes, it requires a mature, proactive response to what's going on in the society. I think Baha'is probably have a range of feelings about the Pledge of Allegiance. Speaking personally, I don't particularly have a problem with it, but I understand that in the wave of nationalism, some people might feel that it's too much, and there's room for discussion and debate. There's no specific teaching about it. The teaching, the fundamental tenets of the faith take precedent over the teachings of the state, of the laws of the state, but Baha'is must work and be loyal to their countries. They must not engage in sedition.
Right, and to be nonpartisan, really, to not really participate in like partisan politics, right? We vote and all of that, but we aren't to say, we're Democrat, we're independent, we're Republican, we're whatever, to just take a nonpartisan approach.
And do Baha'is embrace technology? You know, a lot of times, because I did a show on Mormonism, and you know, a lot of things with uh, polygamy there, and then there's other faiths that you know they don't want to get blood transfusion. I'm just bringing this up because it is a little known faith, so people are going to have misperceptions about smaller religions. Are there any? I mean, Hillary, is there anything like you know blood transfusions or polygamy or anything that Baha'is have a belief that's set aside from mainstream Western religions?
Offhand, none that I can think of. The Baha'i faith is very much in line with Christian belief, Muslim belief that are of that mainstream regarding human relations, regarding relations to the state, regarding issues of personal morality. I think these scientific issues about blood transfusions, vaccines, and all the kind of GMOs, I think these are matters for scientists to sort out and for Baha'i scientists to participate in. And there's no dogma about them other than that.
Nan, any comment?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Hillary said, that, you know, there's nothing about those kinds of strict restrictions of blood transfusions. I mean, unless it's just a personal thing that, you know, a Baha'i might have about it, but it's not part of the writings, the tenets or anything like that.
So is Baha'i considered a Western or an Eastern religion? I've read in looking up, some people would consider it an outgrowth of Islam, the way that Christianity is an outgrowth of Judaism. Others would say that it's somewhere in between the East and the West. I just looking stuff up, you know, some people sort of relate it a little bit to Sufi, the Sufi branch of Islam. Where does it fit in, Hillary, in the world of religious belief?
The Baha'i faith is very clearly a world religion. It should not be thought of as a Middle Eastern religion. It should not be thought of as an American religion. It should not be thought of as a Congolese religion, as a Japanese religion. It's a worldwide religion. And you're going to have across the world very different opinions and attitudes towards diet, food, dress, style, dance, worship, all the things that make up human culture. Those are for matters of dialogue and interaction. Some people like the way they do things. Some people like to learn new things. There are all kinds of people in this world. But the Baha'i faith itself is not one culture promoting one particular area of the world. It's a world religion. The kind of music we like to listen to, that's a personal matter. Kind of dance, theater, all these are personal matters. And then there's a lot of room for dialogue, and that's part of what makes life more exciting, is that there are different ways of doing things. The Baha'i faith itself does not present a cultural or national agenda of any kind.
Right. It, you know, it embraces the notion of one human family, right? That we are all part of this one religion, really, one religion of God, one God. And that, yeah, there are the cultural distinctions, but that's part of the beauty of being able to, nobody's trying to homogenize, right? We all bring our cultures to the table, but we believe in the oneness of humanity. And that's what gives it that one world, one God, one religion status.
So when I did the show on Buddhism, the person I was speaking to was speaking of Buddhism more as a philosophy than a religion, that seeing it as a religion is almost missing the point of Buddhism. But when you say you're a religion, then you do believe in, say, a certain supernaturalism, that there is a God, a spirit, all-pervasive, you know, creator. So you do definitely believe in things like miracles, that God created the world. And when we say God, are we talking the Yahweh, you know, Western God, or just, you know, a God as something, the unnameable, the ineffable?
The Baha'i teaching, as I understand it about God, is that God is transcendent beyond knowledge. So you could say God is X and you'd be right. You could say God is Y and you'd be right, because God is beyond those things. All of those things are analogies and metaphors. God the Father, God the Spirit, God is love. These are all metaphors that are limited by the human mind. The human mind cannot become God, or else there wouldn't be God, there would be human beings. In the same way, there in early Catholicism, they needed Jesus to be God, or he couldn't save anybody. Similarly, God is beyond this realm, and he makes himself or itself or herself known through people in this world, because religion and revelation are not a matter of magic and superstition and the power of an individual. It flows through the manifestation of God. And so Baha'is believe that God is unknowable and transcendent and makes himself known from age to age. In this age, it's Baha'u'llah. In another age, it was Muhammad. Another age, it was Jesus. And there are many, many others whom we don't know of. Where did religion come from in the Americas? The Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas and the early Shang dynasty and the native peoples of Australia. Where did all their beliefs come from? And so the Baha'i faith believes that there's one religion, that it's progressive, and that it reveals itself through time into the world.
Right, right. We call it progressive revelation. You know, it's and God is this unknowable essence. And every 2,000 years or so, when this new energy needs to come and sort of make itself known, that's when you have these prophets like Zoroaster and Jesus and Muhammad, and so Baha'u'llah is the in this progressive revelation has come, and the spiritual teachings really are basically the same. The golden rule, the moral teachings, do unto others, and a lot of those basic spiritual teachings are the same. But there are social teachings that are presented for a specific time, that this essence feel is time for it to happen. The equality of men and women is one of the tenets, things like that. So right now, this is the revelation of Baha'u'llah.
So I did a show with polytheists, or at least one polytheist, and basically animism. So if you were going on a mission, or as I looked at, I guess you call it crusades too, to New Zealand or the outback or whatnot, and there was some animist believers or whatnot. What would a Baha'i say? Would you say that their beliefs in multiple gods are wrong, or how do you reconcile the oneness of religion when sometimes there are quite clear divergences?
Well, God is unknowable. So there are many ways of creating language around what God is, but that's just language for human beings. That's not language about God. God is beyond our language, but we use it so that we can communicate with one another. God, in Western Renaissance art was always depicted in a particular way. That in no way was God, but it was what the people of that culture thought of when they thought of God. So people who live in the outback in Australia, I've never been there, but their animism is how they think when they think about God. Why would they think God looks like the man on the Sistine Chapel? They wouldn't. It wouldn't make sense. So this is their way of conceptualizing something that no one can understand. So a Baha'i who goes and thinks that he or she is going to explain what God is to the native peoples of Australia is missed. I think has the wrong idea. We are encouraged to teach about the Baha'i faith in this sense. People cannot know that God has made himself manifest again in the world unless somebody says it. Then what somebody does with that is up to them. But if a native person in Australia asked me about that, I would say, do you know that God has made himself known again in the world? And I would talk a little about the faith. And if they were interested, we would speak further. And if they weren't, they wouldn't be.
As Baha'is, we don't proselytize. We don't try to convert people. We share the message, like Hillary just said, and beseech God to guide them. If they want to know more, we tell them more. We have things like firesides, where we can invite people who are showing an interest in knowing more to come and learn and ask questions and share. But we don't try to convert people to becoming Baha'i.
So, does Baha'i have any kind of injunctions like the Ten Commandments? Because in looking up, I saw that alcoholism is sort of shunned upon, not alcohol consumption, I should say, and same thing with like homosexuality. Or is there a plenitude of belief systems? Are there more conservative Baha'is and less, more progressive Baha'is?
There are laws of personal conduct and morality, definitely in the Baha'i faith, and those are spelled out. And every person has to, learn or struggle with themselves to master themselves. This is common in all religions. Self-mastery over oneself and the leaving of the self behind and moving towards God is the journey. Whether you're Sufi, Baha'i, Buddhist, Christian mystic, it's the same journey. The journey away from the self. The things that are self that cause the ego to grow are the things that we need to bring down, and it's the spiritual that we need to bring up, and that's always a dynamic process. It's not either or, and laws of personal morality help us go in that direction, at least from a faith perspective. And the purpose of our lives is to grow spiritually, and spiritual growth can be difficult and trying, just like becoming a great athlete or becoming competent at acting or writing. It requires effort. And so the laws of personality of personal morality are in effect in that case. Every individual, is up to them. It's like the law of prayer, which is the foundational law of human behavior in the Baha'i faith. That is really up to the individual, and prayer is a very involved teaching. It's not just a matter of muttering a few words.
But regarding, say, sexual preferences or other things, whether it's drinking alcohol or whatnot, I mean, would these things be, number one, shunned upon? And would someone, is there such a thing as excommunication? Let's say I don't know if you're married or not, Hillary, but if you have two kids and one of them turns out to be a lesbian and says, "Dad, this is just who I am," are they excommunicated from the Baha'i faith, or are they?
There isn't this idea of mortal and venial sins, that kind of gradation.
Okay.
Sexual morality is something that the individual has to work with within themselves, and so the person who's striving to be a Baha'i strive to live by those teachings. We tend to focus on the ones we hear about all the time, and those are, you've mentioned a few of them. There are many moral teachings, like running your business honestly. Is, let's say you can cheat and make more money, or you can increase your profit margins, or backbiting against people and calumniating people at work so you can get ahead. There are many such teachings, and in all of them, we do, Baha'is are called to strive. They don't have to. I mean, everyone is free. From the way I think of it is, it begins with a strong life of prayer, and you move out from there. I can't speak for people who have ways of feeling that are different from my own, because we all have different ways. But that's what I would say about that.
But let me ask you, Nan. But say you might have someone who is struggling with addictions or some sexual aspects that you may not find agreeable, but this doesn't make them bad people. That in other words, since it's a supernaturalist based religion, that person isn't going to hell.
Right. No. And it's not even for us to judge that, like Hillary said, it's up to the individual. We have our teachings, we have our tenets, we have our writings, and we are on our own personal journeys in this world to embrace them as best we can. But certainly not to judge anyone We are to sort of follow our own spiritual path. There's no clergy in the Baha'i faith, by the way.
No.
So it really is up to the individual to do their, first of all, their own individual investigation of the faith. And, read the writings, participate, as much or as little as you want to in the community. But it really is this kind of why are we here spiritual journey, and to figure that out, to answer that question for yourself. And the Baha'i faith has so many writings on that, but it's a very loving and very embracing religion.
So Nancy, if there's no clergy, and you had mentioned just earlier how you had married your ex-husband, I would assume in the Baha'i faith, who is then the person that does it and stamps the thing and sends it off to City Hall?
Right. We have an administrative component to the faith, and there's an administrative body. There are 3 different administrative bodies. There's one at the local level, which is called the Local Spiritual Assembly, it consists of 9 people. There's the National Spiritual Assembly, which is for the whole country. And then there's the Universal House of Justice, which is in Haifa, Israel. And that's the governing body of the entire world religion of the Baha'i faith. It's the Universal House of Justice. I actually happen to be on the Local Spiritual Assembly here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we're just ordinary people, regular folks, regular Baha'is, on our own spiritual journeys. But we do the administrative work of marriage, of different things that the community might be involved with. Each local community has a Baha'i center. So there's the upkeep of the Baha'i center where we go and worship every 19 days. If we have a Baha'i center, if there's no Baha'i center, if it's too small a community, or there just happens to not be a Baha'i center, people meet at other people's homes. But we do the LSA, Local Spiritual Assembly, National Spiritual Assembly, do all of that kind of administrative work to kind of keep the organization intact in that way.
And not to get too personal, but since you are divorced, then is that something that is looked upon within the faith, that it was a failure of the 2 people, it was a failure of the faith, or is it just accepted that sometimes it doesn't work out even for Baha'is?
Well, it's not encouraged.
Yeah.
It's not encouraged. It's encouraged to make your marriage a fortress of well-being, but it's not, if it doesn't happen, it's not frowned upon.
Okay, and
so not thought of as a bad person.
So I want to get to the history, and we'll take a little break here. But the final question I have in this portion is, since we were talking a little bit about the supernaturalism, do Baha'is believe in an afterlife? Is it an afterlife similar to other Western or even Eastern religions' afterlife? Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe in past lives, future lives, that kind of thing, Hillary?
A person's spiritual life begins at conception. And the point of this phase of that person's life is to refine themselves spiritually. That's why we go through tests and difficulties. Marriage can be a great test. Work can be a great test. Our families can be a great test. Our jobs can be a great test. A lack of employment, all the things that life takes. And we go through life, and the point is to refine and develop ourselves spiritually. And at some point, our body ceases to be, and our soul continues on from world to world in the next worlds of God. In this world, we have the free will to refine and develop ourselves. After this world, we live on the grace of God. And therefore, we want to, in one sense, prepare ourselves for the future world, which is, I think of it as a supra world. It's even more real than this world, but we can't know it because our minds are bound by time and space. And so we can't think of something that doesn't have this kind of linearity with which we live. Although if you're an artist like Nan, you know this idea of kind of moving back and forth, past and present, and all like this. That's what artists do. Our lives, we move through it, and the point is to refine, to grow nearer and closer to God. The closer we are to God and the joy of that transcendence, the closer we are to what has traditionally been called heaven. The farther we are from it, where we are involved in ourselves, our own ego-based desires, the more we are in the torment. And, you know, you can see that very often with people who are very rich and powerful, but very isolated and in a state of torment. There, from an ego point of view, there's been a great deal of achievement, but from another point of view, it's a great trap. And that's why in Christian theology and Baha'i theology, wealth is very often considered a great danger, because there's a danger that can lurk there spiritually. After this life, we go from world to world, and we will remember this life and pray for people in this life. And Baha'u'llah tells us that many of the arts are generated from the spiritual influence that come into the world through souls in the next life.
That's so interesting, Hillary. I mean, it really is about balance, right? And understanding that whole ego and balancing the material world with the spiritual world, because it's not thought of as a sin or anything wrong to have money. You know, having material gain is good, but you really have to know how to balance it so that you don't think that you are the money, that your worth is the material.
One thing I just want to pick up on what Hillary said, and then we'll move on to the next segment. He spoke about conception, and that's now, you know, of course, a big buzzword here in the U.S. since Roe versus Wade was repealed. So, Nancy, having spoken a few times with you now, you strike me as on the liberal side of things. What is the Baha'i take, if there is a singular one, on a woman's right to have an abortion?
I don't know if there's a Baha'i take on it. I don't know if you know, Hillary, but I think it's really an individual choice. I mean, life begins at conception. And I think that's where you get down on your knees and you pray and you ask God for guidance to help you through this moment in your life. And I also think it depends on where you are spiritually, on the spiritual path, about that's such an individual, personal decision. I mean, I don't know. I think it's something that the individual would have to really pray about, unless there are very specific writings about it that I don't know.
Hillary, do you have
a pregnancy can be terminated for reasons of, you know, if there are a few reasons, I forget which ones, but generally it is the woman's choice. And I don't think that, you know, if you have to see things in their totality, I don't think that any Baha'i who has a real understanding of spiritual teachings would think, hey, it's a great thing.
Right.
I don't think they would think that at all, because human life, it has value intrinsically. Whoever the person is in whatever part of development, whether they're elderly people or little young people, whatever, they have value intrinsically. So but this is something that can be personally chosen by an individual in certain cases.
So let us now talk to the history of Baha'i. And it's interesting because it seems to have been a fellow named, I guess, the Bab, you pronounce it, and then, as you say, Baha'u'llah. And I did a show on Mormons, and it's interesting because they too have a couple of Joseph Smith as the founder, and then the great proponent was the second guy who came along, Brigham Young. And it's almost as so is that an apt comparison? Was the Bab sort of the Joseph Smith, and then the Baha'u'llah, was he sort of the Brigham Young who was the disciple? Because these are religions that started within a couple of decades of each other. Hillary?
They did. That's interesting. I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
It is similar in the sense that there were two. It's very different in how the relationship between how Mormons see Joseph Smith and how Baha'is see the Bab and Baha'u'llah. The Baha'is believe that Bab and Baha'u'llah, like Muhammad and Jesus and Moses and Abraham and Buddha and others, are manifestations of God with a capital N. That is, they are God in the world. They are they are the living word of God, to use Bible language. Whatever they say is of God and from God. It's not from their will. So Baha'is see these two figures in these exalted terms. They are human in the sense of sleeping and eating, like Jesus fell asleep and Jesus ate. But they are divine in that they are clear channels and are perfect reflections of the virtues of God. So they make God manifest. That's why Baha'is use that term manifestation. Sometimes Baha'is use the word prophet or messenger, but the Baha'i term is manifestation for the reason I just described. The Bab emerges clearly out of a Islamic context. He has a very short ministry. It's 6 years. It's very eventful in Iran. And he's the one who makes the break with Islam by saying that not only is he the fulfillment of Islam, but he marks a new divine revelation. And this made him an apostate because in traditional Islam, Muhammad was the last, to be the last of the revealers of God's message. And after that would be the time of the end. The Bab said he was a new manifestation of God after Muhammad, and he had come, like John the Baptist, to prepare the way for a second divine outpouring. So Baha'is believe that the coming of the Bab marks the end of a millennia's-old cycle of prophecy, and that the appearance of Baha'u'llah marks the new cycle of human unity on this planet that will mark the final and culminating stage of human development on this planet, where the world will be united economically, politically, and spiritually into one large entity, and that we will see the unity of the human race.
Getting back to the Mormon comparisons, it seems that in Iran, that the early Baha'i were treated pretty similarly to the Mormons in that they were excluded. I mean, I don't know if they did a hike of 1,000 miles into the desert like they did in Utah, but you'd mentioned that you were going to get back to it. Are there any other parallels you can give to? Because I use Mormons simply because most people are American, and that seems the closest parallel within the last couple of centuries.
Right, and so Mormonism grows up during the same time as the Baha'i faith in Iran, and it grows up, as you know, in a place in New York State, which the burned over district, where there were intense religious feelings. And then you had William Miller, for example, the New York farmer, who believed that Jesus was going to return. And the year he predicted is exactly the year the Bab made his public announcement as the manifestation of God. So Baha'is do believe that when the manifestation of God appears, a great spiritual power is released into the world. And I personally believe that what you see as having gone on in the burned over district, Joseph Smith, the Millerites, and all the different movements of mid-19th century America, I think these are direct results of this spiritual power that was unleashed into the world. I also believe that all this technological growth, which has been unprecedented in human history, is directly a result of the appearance of the manifestation of God. Because in this day and age, Baha'is believe that we will see the unity of the human race. Nothing helps that, like being able to get on an airplane, like using the internet, like having common languages. And so I believe that these technologies have come into existence for this purpose. And that's why they didn't happen earlier. As you probably know, many people debate, why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen in ancient Greece with all these brilliant thinkers?
Well, it's interesting because from what you're saying, because now it's pretty much fairly well established that humankind has been causing global warming, and since the onset of the Industrial Revolution. So would your argument be that the Bab or God manifested this to create a crisis to unite people so that people will be united by trying to save the planet?
That's a very interesting
I'm spitballing.
I think there's probably some truth to that, that the two go together. The only way to solve, and all these problems are eminently solvable, refugee flows, international issues of taxation, all these global warming, they're eminently solvable if people sit around the table. And in fact, that's the only way they get solved. So in a weird way, I would probably agree with you. But I have no knowledge of the knowledge of God.
Nan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's nothing like a crisis to unite people, right? You know, folks need to come together when they can see that all of their lives are attached to this tragedy, the earthquakes. You know, I don't think people are trying to decide if who they're saving is a Muslim or a Catholic or whatever. You know, 9/11 here in America, you know, these kinds of things are the things that really kind of bring people together. And I just wanted to make another note. You were asking about correlations. Um, there, to me, I always think of John the Divine, who came before Jesus, and he came to tell the world that there's one coming greater than myself, right? And so the Bob also spoke about Baha'u'llah, and sort of came to prepare the world for the coming of Baha'u'llah. He was in and of himself a manifestation of God, but he knew that his life was going to be short-lived, and that it was Baha'u'llah that was going to bring the new world religion, so to speak.
Before we get to Baha'u'llah, it sounds actually more like the Bab is closer, if you want to say mythologically, or has a function less like Jesus and Muhammad and more like the Buddha, in that the Buddha seems to be looked at as sort of the human manifestation of the cosmic, the ineffable cosmic power, whatever it is. And that actually, the Bob sounds to me, just as an outsider, sounds more in that vein. Is that so? And Hillary, would you say that there are any, if any, connections philosophically between Buddhism and which is probably the chief Eastern religion that we know of here in the West, and Bahai?
The thing that they all have absolutely in common, the Bab and his teachings and his spirituality, the Buddha, from what we know of him, and Baha'u'llah, is this letting go of self and moving towards God, going from the particular to the general, from the lesser to the greater, to see these things as a progress towards the divine and a reality that's beyond our own selves. You'll find in any act of meditation or Buddhist piety, you have these kinds of themes of moving away from yourself. There's a kind of a retail Buddhism in this country, which is what you find in yoga studios and things like that. I would be careful about saying that's Buddhism. But if you look at Buddhist texts and practices around the world, you'll find a real effort to move away from the self. And this is very much in keeping with the Bab's teachings and Baha'u'llah's teachings. That we are here to develop mastery over the self, not to be enslaved by the self, not to be subject to one's own whims and ego desires and empty thoughts, which are generated from our ego, from our fear, from all of these things, that these are empty idols and that we have to move away from that. So in that sense, the spirituality that these three figures express is very similar. Culturally, they're expressed very differently, but they're very similar.
Any comments, Nan?
No, I mean, I agree 100% that, you know, it really is about detachment. You know, there are a lot of writings in the Baha'i faith about detachment, radiant acquiescence, and it's so hard. I mean, it is such a challenge to be able to not be so consumed with self, with desire, with all of that, because it's all about balance. That's the one thing that, you know, when I was first learning about the Baha'i faith, that it's not fanaticism. It's not about do this or else. It really is this balance of who you are as a human being, your purpose here, your spiritual journey, and being able to detach yourself from your ego in order to sort of free yourself to be who you truly are.
Before we talk about the Baha'u'llah, I just wanted to sort of take a little tangent here about the idea of self, because I think one of the things that's often made parodic in the description of Western versus Eastern religion is the idea of individualist, especially American individualism and the self versus letting go of that as sort of the Eastern equivalent. But there's good selfishness and bad selfishness. For example, if Nan gives a stellar performance on Broadway and wins it, well, we can all say that we're part of the living cosmos, but there's something in that cosmos known as Nan-Lynn Nelson that won that award. If I write a great sonnet, there's something in me that did that. In Herman Melville, a Stanley Kubrick film, or if you do a great jazz one that has people applauding at the end of the show. I mean, there is something to be said about the self, is there not?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a matter of your consciousness, right? And how you think about it, your intentionality about it. Yeah, I'm a writer, I'm an actor. I love the stage, I love applause. I love all of those things, but how does it impact me as a person? Do I think, oh, I'm great and wonderful because I'm getting all of this applause from an audience? I think as an artist, I feel like my art comes from another source. Certainly when I'm writing, it comes from a completely different source. And I always say, well, I didn't really write that play. I don't know why those characters are saying what they're saying. That's just how it flowed through me, So yeah, it's not about rejecting these things, these material things. It's about having that balance and not allowing it to consume you so that you think that you're better than somebody else because you get an award. It really is about keeping that self and ego in balance.
So as an artist, and this is one of the things hopefully we'll talk about in a later show, you don't look at yourself, Nan-Lynn, as the demiurge. You look at yourself as sort of an Ariel that's divine, bringing in divine inspiration.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. I mean, I think that I have a natural ability as an actor to do things, to create a character, to make the character believable. But I think it's not me doing it. It comes from a different source, a higher source. And you can kind of feel it, when you're doing it, like when you get the emotions, because you're connecting with words, you're connecting with the other person, the other human being on that stage. And it really becomes a very divine, spiritual, mystical even experience.
Do you agree, Hillary, if you're doing a great jazz riff there, is that from Hillary or is that from elsewhere and you're just the antenna?
I'm not that talented, so I can't say. I'm in awe of people like Beethoven and Charlie Parker and others, and I do see them as kind of lesser deities. I do think they are reflecting something extremely important. I'd like to point out that in the ancient world, have you been to the new Greco-Roman wing at the Met?
I have not.
No.
So it's wall-to-wall magnificent statuary, magnificent. There are no signatures of people anywhere. They never go, and this is the latest blah, blah, blah. It's just some magnificent statue of a lady carrying a water vessel. So is it what's important, the name of the artist and the work? we're getting now into commercialization of art. Everybody has to make a living. I don't begrudge anybody. So that's a different discussion. Yeah, creativity very much can come from spirituality. And I do think that the people who still speak to us now after centuries, it comes from somewhere. Yeah.
So who was Baha'u'llah and what was his relationship to the Bab?
Baha'u'llah was a nobleman in 19th century Iran who became a follower of the Bab. That's his relationship. He came to believe that the Bab was the fulfillment of Islam and then did represent a new revelation. As a result of all of the turmoil in Iran with this religious fervor that had come up, Shiism is a very outwardly fervent form of religiosity. And Baha'u'llah was thrown into prison as part of the persecution of the followers of the Bab. The Bab was executed. And then in prison, Baha'u'llah testifies that he had a vision and came to believe that he was the manifestation of God for this day and the one promised by the Bab. And that he was exiled out of Iran to get him away from the Shia centers to Baghdad. And in Baghdad, he told his followers, I am the new manifestation of God. And at that point, he developed a group of followers who called themselves Baha'is. And they were exiled from place to place until they were finally exiled to Palestine, today Israel, to the fortress city of Akka. And from there, he revealed the Book of Laws, which is the central book of the Baha'i faith. And he revealed many of his works, many of which are results of questions that were set forth to him by others. And belief in Baha'u'llah spread very quickly throughout Iran, Iraq, and a few other places.
Was Baha, well, were the Bab and Baha'u'llah, were they spared? Well, the second one, Baha'u'llah, was spared because then Iran was run by the Shahs, was it not?
Right.
So it was more secular thing. If this had been, if they had come along, say, in the last 40 years, they probably would have been executed, both of them, right?
I wouldn't describe 19th century Iran as secular because certainly the
government,
Shah
the government
was one leg. The Shah was one leg of a stool, but the other leg of the stool were the clerics, and the clerics were the ones who were closer to the people, as 1979 the revolution showed us. The clerics were the ones who knew the villagers, met with everybody on a day-to-day basis. So as clerics turned towards the Bab, and hundreds of them did, and later Baha'u'llah, this really was a source of turmoil. The Shah at the time of the Bab was very interested in hearing about this new message and wanted very much to interact with the Bab directly, but his efforts were thwarted. What would happen today, I don't know.
Any comments, Nan?
Well, Baha'is are still being persecuted in Iran. They're being jailed. They are, I don't know if they're being executed, Hillary, in jail. Are they, the Baha'is?
Some have been, yeah. There have been destruction of property, but they've suffered a lot. There's been a lot of, if not economic and professional, a lot of psychological suffering because of the constant torment that people have put them through.
And just to be clear, and I'm sure Hillary made that point, it is not an offshoot of Islam. And that's been the conflict. That's been the issue, that Muslims feel as though because Baha'u'llah came, that they are sort of in defiance of Muhammad. And so that's why there's this continual persecution that happens. It's a completely separate religion as established by the Bab, which is why he was executed by firing squad.
So when did Baha'i come into the West in terms of you know, first knowledge of it? I mean, was it 50 years after? Was it after World War One? Between the two world wars? When did it get a foothold? Say, from what I can read, Europe has probably the least amount of Baha'is, but here in North and South America, when did it come to the New World?
The Americas in the 1890s.
And
It was first mentioned at the Chicago World's Fair. There was an article read by a Christian missionary, and then there were several Baha'i teachers who came. One was a Syrian, and then there were some Iranians, and it kicked off from there. And there were some very strong early American believers, including my great grandparents, and they're the ones who taught the faith throughout this country, and people like Louis Gregory. Louis Gregory spent a substantial portion of every year traveling and teaching, staying in hotels on his own. And we forget what that means for a Black man to be venturing around the South, talking in different rooms and churches and colleges about something like the Baha'i faith. Louis Gregory was not only often in danger because of the white racism, but he was often belittled by Black American mainstream people who said, what a waste, this great lawyer. You know, there's some very harsh articles written about him. So these great early Baha'is were the ones who really spread it. And then in 1912, the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, Abdul Baha, made a journey throughout the Americas, throughout North America, rather, Canada and the United States, that cemented the communities into being, really consolidated them.
So earlier you had mentioned that there isn't sort of a conversion mindset, but how do you go about quote unquote preaching the truth that you feel is the truth without the express purpose of wanting to convert? I mean, do you go on like the Jehovah's Witnesses? Do you go knocking on doors and passing out leaflets? How did that go about?
Some people like to do that. I don't love to do that. I open my home and have people who are interested come over. And I base that approach on, there's a Baha'i scripture that says, no man speaketh until he obtaineth a hearing. So I wait till somebody is interested. I have gone in other places in the world and served with other Baha'is. It's very often a combination of fellowship, teaching, answering questions. Some people are interested, some aren't. It's all this kind of thing. Do I hope that they become Baha'is? Yes, but not for myself. I don't feel like I need to come back home with a list of names or to make somebody become something. That's really up to them. My job is to be myself as good a Baha'i as I can be. And I think Nan will agree with it, that's plenty hard. It's plenty hard being a Baha'i and really striving spiritually. You go forward and backwards and forward and backwards. So I then try to offer what I understand to whomever is interested. And I do make a proactive effort. I do open my home. And if somebody such as you were to say, I'd like to talk more about it, I would say, come on over on Friday. And I do also have children's classes where I proactively teach the Baha'i faith. And I teach them about prayer and who God is. And then it's really, it's up to them. There's no compunction in matters of faith.
So, go ahead, Nan. You want to say something?
I was just going to say, and often you can just look for an opportunity. Sometimes you're having a conversation with someone and it might turn to faith, or it might turn to, God or something. Down here in Charlotte, I'm relatively new to this area, but one thing, especially among Black folks, one thing they do when they first meet you is they say, well, what church do you go to? And then when you say, well, I don't go to church per se, I'm a Baha'i, and then it becomes, oh, well, what is that? And sometimes it's met with, raised eyebrows, and sometimes it's met with genuine curiosity. We are encouraged to engage in fellowship with all religions, because it is all just one religion. But I find that that's where a lot of teaching opportunity comes from, people asking you what church you go to. or just having the intention to do it, to think, well, if I meet someone today and they seem like they might be interested, or if we happen to bond on something, I'm a bit conservative when it comes to that, because I think it's really important to establish relationships with people, and sort of get to know them just as people before you mention a new religion to them, because religion is a very sensitive subject for a lot of people, and it could take them instantly away from you, or it could make them feel like they want to know more. So for me, it's very strategic on how I approach it.
So the Baha'i faith is now a century and a half or more old. Have there been schisms? Are there A, B, and C sects within Baha'i? And what is the current state of Baha'i? Is it, I mean, we have the Sunnis and Shias, we have Eastern Orthodox and Catholic and Protestant, and then subdivisions, because I was, for example, raised as a Missouri Synod Lutheran, because being a Lutheran wasn't good enough. You had to be in the Missouri Synod, whatever that was. So are there schisms of any kind?
No, a central concept of the Baha'i faith is the concept of the covenant, that there is a unity of teaching, a unity of belief. And it stems from this, that after Baha'u'llah passed away, he made a will and testament. And in that will and testament, he, who is the manifestation of God, the author of the faith, said, turn to Abdul Baha for any questions and for any interpretations. And Abdul Baha made a will and testament, and he said, turn to Shoghi Effendi, who was his grandson, for any interpretations and questions. And today, after the passing of the Shoghi Effendi, we have the Baha'i Administrative Order that now applies the Baha'i teachings, of which Nan, for example, is a part today. And there's only one of those. What there is are Baha'is of all kinds of different opinions. I'm sure there are Baha'is who vote Democratic. I'm sure there are Baha'is who vote Republican. I'm sure there are Baha'is think that everything's corrupt and we shouldn't vote. I'm sure there are all kinds of, but differences of opinion don't mean that they are not Baha'is and not sincere. It means they're seeing the world in a different way. They have different understandings. Maybe they have too much knowledge, a lack of knowledge, whatever the case is. But the operative principle when Baha'is work together is the principle of consultation. I'm going to listen to you. You're going to listen to me. And it may be difficult to talk about certain things, and so we can put that aside for now and come back to it later. But there's only one Baha'i faith and one belief. There are people who are at all levels of practice, and there are people who have all levels of experience, who see life differently. They just see it differently, different culture, different social class, different educational level, different life experience. And all of those have to be listened to. Doesn't mean anybody is absolutely right or absolutely wrong, but the human experience always has to be listened to and to be considered. But there's only one Baha'i faith, and there's only one core spiritual truth, and that is the revelation of God. Now, what that means can be very much discussed.
As we wrap up, I want to give both of you an opportunity to say anything that we've missed, but I've got a few other questions. Number one, what do Baha'is think about animals, animal rights, the rights of other living things? There are some believers. I mentioned I did a polytheistic show. I think it's in New Zealand that there's a river that's considered to have personhood by the local beliefs. That what does a Baha'i think about non-human existence, be it animals, be it trees, fungi, or if there's alien life out there?
The Baha'i faith teaches that there are gradations of existence. There are kingdoms. So, for example, the vegetable kingdom is a higher kingdom than the mineral kingdom, because that's the power of growth. The kingdom of the animals is more powerful than vegetables because they have sentience and they have all kinds of smells and hearings, etc. The Baha'i faith teaches that the human being is at the apex of, if you will, this pyramid, if you want to see it that way. In the human being are all the attributes of the other kingdoms. We have minerals, we have growth, we have sentience, we have all of our faculties, but we have another dimension, which is our spiritual dimension. So we are at the top, in one sense, of the physical world, and we are at the beginning of the spiritual worlds, because we are not the manifestation of God, and we are not yet in the spiritual world itself. So we are the purpose of physical existence is the human being. And one of the things that's interesting is that a galaxy, and those are amazing photos from the Webb telescope, are far less complex, even though they're enormous and amazing to look at on a telescope. They're far less complex than the brain of one human being.
In a physical sense, because
the neurons and the
yes.
neurons and the activity in the human brain and what it can do is far more complex than a galaxy, which takes, I don't know how long a galaxy takes to cross, but I suppose it's a long time.
But the argument would be that your brain is part of the Milky Way galaxy.
Yes, your brain is absolutely part of the physical world, no doubt. So, and yet I believe that there's a spiritual dimension to that. And art and creativity are some aspects of that manifestation.
So unlike, say, a pantheist who would look at a tiger, a newt, a bird as being in some way a manifestation of creation itself, you have this more pyramid structure then. Yes, but that doesn't mean that that would not absolve you of be cruelty to animals then.
Pyramid was my word, as just a visual, because it can be a helpful visual. Because the human being is at the apex because it has all the other qualities, but it doesn't. The natural world is a manifestation of God with a small n. It has been brought into being by something, and in somehow, which I am completely unqualified to say. The Baha'i faith does not teach pantheism because God is transcendent.
Okay.
And the Bible's way of explaining the relationship between the divine and the physical is, in the beginning was the Word, and it's through the will of God that something is brought into being, and that seems to be a good metaphor.
So if I could, so Nan, so would you say then that humanity is not the master of Earth, but the stewards of Earth because they are the highest?
Steward is a better word. Yeah, absolutely. Cruelty to animals is immoral.
Okay.
By Baha'i standards, definitely.
Go ahead.
That does not mean you have to be a vegetarian, and that can be a little bit of a sore point, I understand. And I think there are legitimate arguments that people want to make against the meat industry. I think these are matters for consultation and talking. Is it better at plant diet? Is it better to eat beef all the time? What are the better things? But steward is a better word, yes. I agree.
Nan?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the energy of God, the divine, is in all living things, right? That it permeates, the beauty of a flower, a blade of grass, an ant. That is infused with the energy of this divine creator that created all of us.
So, as I said, I want to give you both a chance to have a final say, but I want to touch on one other thing here before we do that. And I myself am an atheist / agnostic. I would consider myself irreligious. I don't particularly like the sort of Richard Dawkins kind of gotcha kind of atheism. But when I think of why I don't have certain belief systems, there are these sort of what people would call logical fallacies in believing, say, in an all-powerful God and an all-good God in a world that has such manifest evil historically, now, and into the foreseeable future. Slavery, mass murder, rape, war, pestilence, forced famine, all these kinds of things, the Holocaust, this genocide, that genocide, racism, bigotry against certain religions, whatever it might be. So how do you as a Baha'i resolve it? Because as an outsider, having just listened to an hour or so of you both speaking of it, it would seem to me that you would say that you just take it on faith, that you don't necessarily worry about the mechanics of that. Am I missing that, or
What is the
uh,
mechanic?
let's say the seeming fallacy of an all powerful God and an all good God in a world that has evil? Just the
Well, I mean, I think that from a Baha'i perspective, the source of all evil is the lower nature of the human being.
So it's not the
The
devil.
human,
It's not an outside agent like Satan.
if you, it's not beyond the control of human beings. Uh, it may be beyond the control of a human being. So the Baha'i faith, for example, has teachings that are individual teachings for individuals, but also the collective, the society. The society has to fix its problems. One person can't solve a social problem, but the society can. So I wouldn't, yes, I do take it on faith, though, about the existence of God. That I definitely, it's a matter of faith. I see religion in one way. People tend to look at it as like vacation package. So here's the Buddhism vacation package, and you do X, Y, and Z. Here's the Christian one. Here's the. I would look at it from the inside out rather than the outside in. And I would encourage people who are interested in these subjects to begin a practice of contemplation and prayer, and they can use the Baha'i writings for that and see what new perceptions they have.
Nan, do you have any comment in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, we are all endowed with, all of the attributes of God, but we also have free will, and part of that free will, disciplined or just out there doing whatever, is sort of that's sort of what we're trying to figure out, how best to negotiate that in a spiritual world. um my spiritual journey has taken me here. I was raised a Baptist, in New York City. I went on a spiritual journey. I became a Buddhist for a couple of years, um, and then I was introduced to the Baha'i faith, and it that made the most sense to me. Oh, and I became a born again Christian after my Buddhism. But the Baha'i faith just made sense to me. And I realized that I was trying to make sense of my life in the world. And once I started reading about the Baha'i faith, it all just sort of came together for me that, yes, one human family, no such thing as race or races. Well, no such thing as race. There's just one race, the human race. Being an African American woman, those kinds of things sort of just resonated with me in my spirit. Um, and so, when I was learning about the faith and reading all of these things, and I was a single mother at the time, raising two children, I wanted something that I could sort of envelop my children in as a way of raising them on this moral, spiritual level. And the Baha'i faith really just answered so many of the questions for me, just in terms of my humanity, right? Before I knew anything about all of the other tenets and stuff like that, just recognizing my humanity um, meant so much to me. And then, of course, learning all about the tenets and stuff. And I'm so grateful to Jeffrey for introducing me to the faith, um, and having our children raised in the faith as well.
So I will be linking to a couple of your websites that I linked to earlier, Nan, and also Hillary. You've got a music site, Reverb Nation and Journey's Faith. So I'll link to them so people can find you. But let me just ask you then: is there anything that you'd like to say in summation, or that we may have missed that you think is an important point? Let me go with you, Hillary, and then I'll end with Nan.
I think religion is a practice, and you can only see what it is by trying to do it, to engage in prayer, to see if new ideas come to you, new visions come to you, and what you see for yourself in the world. I think that's at the core of religion, is the practice of it. Like, you can sit on the fence and talk about things till the cows come home. And having studied the Bible for years and theology and all that, there's a lot of that, but it's the inner eye that has to open up.
Nan, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, thank you for that, Hillary. What's happening right now, currently in this world, in terms of the disunity, the turmoil, the hate, the anger, the confusion, is no accident. This is something actually that the writings talk about. This is no accident that all of this, it feels crazy to me, the hatred. And it's the teachings, in my opinion, of the Baha'i faith, this uniting people, unity and oneness of mankind. That's sort of like the foundation of this religion, to unite people and to unite them by engaging in genuine friendship and genuine conversation. Hillary mentioned consultation. There's a very specific way that Baha'is consult, and it is by putting your idea on the table and then letting it go, detaching yourself from it, so that people can discuss the idea as the idea, not as Nancy's idea or Hillary's idea, just the idea, because the point of the consultation is to get to a satisfactory answer for everyone in the group. And we can't do that if someone feels like, well, I didn't agree with Nancy's idea, and then Nancy's going to take offense to it. So I find that this is a religion for today, to help unite the whole planet on a human level, on a spiritual level, and then to move it forward into the next century.
Just one follow-up, because you used the term, you said you didn't believe that it was an accident, that things are happening. Do Baha'is believe in anything like determinism, or do you believe you each have free will? I just had to get that in because she brought it up.
That's just your light last question.
Yeah.
Yes, both are true.
Okay.
One of the things that's fascinating in the Baha'i writings is that they're cyclical things that are very Hindu, if you will, and there are free will things. A very simple analogy that Abdul Baha makes, which shows this some sort of, is that a candle, it's the destiny of a candle to burn out because of its candleness. But when it does, we don't know. Maybe the window will open and the flame will go out. But there are many aspects in the Baha'i writings, like what Nancy referred to earlier, progressive revelation, the return of the manifestation of God. Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is the return to Christ, and that all manifestations are the return of the previous one. So there's a cyclical dimension to the way Baha'is see history. At the same time, we see history as progressing, that we are carrying forth an ever-advancing civilization. That's a term, a phrase you hear all the time in Baha'i speaking. And so you have these very interesting, both of them at the same time, and I don't know. I can't sort that out. I myself am studying it. But I've seen those two tendencies in the Baha'i writings.
All right. Well, thank you both then for an interesting conversation.
Thank you.